Welcome back to Commercial Breaks with Miss Education. I'm Miss Education. All right, episode 52. Let's get into it. Entitled "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." So, and for those of you who don't know that phrase, what I'm basically going, it's a verse. What I'm speaking about is tithing, giving God a portion of your earnings. The portion biblically is 10%, and I guess I just want to share. I want to share with you how this promise that God has given has worked for me. And I share this, like I said in the past, if I know something and if I've witnessed or if I've experienced something that is positive or negative, right, I will definitely share so that I can help edify somebody, I can help teach, I can guide, whatever it is, or help prevent something. I want to share my pros and my cons, my wins and my losses, and this is definitely a win in my life. And so I'm sharing this for anyone who's listening, and I want you to test God, right? Growing up, not sure how my parents did it. As you know, my parents are both educators and both pastors, right? So I grew up in the church, and I don't know how they did it, but they got me tithing at a very young age. I can remember as a little girl getting money for my birthday and setting aside 10%, right? I think that was the first real grown-up mathematical thing I could do, was figure out 10% of anything, right? Move the decimal over. So as a little girl, I would give 10%. If graduation money, 10%. And now as a 43-year-old, yes, 43. And now as a 43-year-old, I've done this. I've been, when I do my bills, I make a yearly calendar and write out all my bills. The first thing that's on my bills each month is giving back at least 10. I give more than 10, but we'll just stick with 10%, to give back 10%. So there's 10% of my salary that I don't entertain. I do not get to spend. I don't use to pay bills. It is used to further God's work, to help others, to church, whatever it is used for the glory of God, right? And in this case, the math doesn't math, right? The math ain't mathing. There are times where I'm like, God, I don't have, and you want me to give 10%, right? And you know what happened? I'll be honest with you. That thought goes into my head for a split second, but then I remember what He's done for me in the past, and I don't question. So now I'm at the point in my life where tithing is not an option. Like, you know how you got to pay your rent or you get kicked out, or your mortgage, or you pay your insurance? Tithing is one of those. Like, there's no, like, I'm not playing with that. Tithing comes first, and everything else falls to the wayside. With that being said, I want to again remember, God's words do not return void, right? So I'm going to read Malachi 3 verse 10. And those of us who grew up in the church, this is something that we all know. And for those of you listening who are not familiar, I want you to listen. And again, remember, God's words do not return void. So everything that He said, by definition of who He is, has to come to pass, right? So in Malachi 3 verse 10 to 10. Okay, I don't have my glasses, so bear with me. Bring the whole tithe, again, that's 10%, right? So bring the whole 10% into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. Let me read that again, right? I know a lot of us, we know this, but listen to this. God says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, right? So gift me so that I can then feed others. And we all know that God doesn't need us to do this, because if we don't praise Him, the rocks will. God doesn't need us, right? This is about faith. So bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there will be food in my house. Test me in this. God's like, yo, you don't believe me? Try me, right? I know He ain't saying it like that, but try me, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven. Look, just the imagery. Y'all know like how we have dams, right? Just imagine for a second. You're standing there, watching, taking pictures of this water thingy, this structure, and the dam opens up on you. what happens? You won't make it, right? That gush, that force of water that has been sitting behind that wall, when open, will take you out. Will take you out. You won't be able to survive it. You can't swim through it. You can't walk on it. You can't go around it. You're over. Okay? So God is saying, see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven. Okay? The floodgates of heaven, and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. I am going to inundate you. I'm going to smother you. I'm going to suffocate you. I'm going to drown you in my blessings. God says, test him. And I'm telling you, I have tested God over and over and over again. And his words do not come back void. I lack for nothing. I mean, I can tell you story after story about times when I'm like, God, especially when I first had Ethan, baby number one, and I was living in Texas, right? And Jamal was up here in Massachusetts going to school. And there'd be times I'm like, God, I don't have this money. And I know I've said this before, right? I don't have this money to either feed myself or put gas in the car or feed the baby. Like, I don't have it. But you want me to give you 10. And I said, you know what? I'm giving you 10. I'm giving you 10. And at that time, I was cheap. I was just giving 10. I was like, God, you said 10. I'm not giving you 11. I'm not giving you 10.1, 10, because I can't even afford to eat right now. I'm giving you 10. And without fail, I gave my 10. And I had food for the week, gas in my car, and a little extra every single time. And there are times when I've given my 10, and like I have experienced the floodgates, right? In times when the return out of nowhere was 2,000-3,000. And I know that doesn't sound much now. Again, it's relative. But when you have 0, 2,000-3,000 is a floodgates. It is the floodgates of heaven when you have 0 out of nowhere without your doing. That is the God I serve. That is the God I serve. It's, there's a story in the Bible. Again, I know my sister calls me. She's like, Jen, you should probably read the Bible before you read the stories before you talk about them, which is true. But I just speak, right? I don't plan these out. I just turn on the camera and I'm like, God, what am I talking about? And boom, here we are. But there's a story in the Bible, this woman who had, she had like a jar of oil. Again, I may be wrong, but you get the premise, okay? She had just a jar of oil, a little bit of oil and flour, enough for her to make one last meal for her and her son. And they were like, after this, we're going to die. A prophet comes and he's like, listen, woman, I need you to feed me. Of course, he didn't say it like that. Okay. All right, woman, I need you to feed me. And she's like, I literally have a little bit of oil and a little bit of bread. That's all I got. And then we die. And the prophet's like, you know what? Collect all the jars that you can. Collect all the jars that you can. Go to your neighbors. Go to your neighbors. Because the woman was willing to make him the food, right? She was willing to make him the food. He says, go to your neighbors. Collect all the jars in the neighborhood. And with that little oil that you have, keep pouring into all these jars. And as it is not a story, as history, right? Because I'm done saying that these are Bible stories. As history has written down, as history has left us this miracle, right? The woman keeps pouring in her little jar of oil. She keeps pouring oil into all of these jars until she has all the jars in the neighborhood and there are no more jars, and then the oil stops. Who knows? I might be mixing up two stories. I don't know. My sisters will correct me, but the point is this: when we are faithful to God and we do as God requires of us, right? God wanted, feed my prophet. If we are faithful and to do the small things that God requires of us, again, test me, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out such a blessing that you, right, whoever you are, put your name in there, Like Jen, you won't have enough room to receive it, girl. So I challenge you, 2024, I challenge you this month, this year, whenever you're watching this, test God. He says it, right? I'm not saying test God, be fresh and no, it says, God says in Malachi 10, he says, test me in this and see if I don't open the floodgates of heaven. You know, just imagine the earth, the sky opening up and dropping a blessing on you. Honey, I'm here to receive it. Hello. Okay? Imagine open floodgates that you won't have room to receive it. So I'm going to leave you with that because we serve a mighty God. I hope that you look, because there are different people watching this. There are those who I pray that you find God and fall in love with God. There are those of you who know God. I pray that you reconnect with him and learn him for yourself, right? Get to know him and have an intimate relationship with him for yourself, not through secondhand smoke, not through secondhand anything. Like, do this for yourself. And then for those of you who are already in the word, like my sister says, she says, Jen, I pray that God, that your fire doesn't go out, right? So for those of you who are already in here, I pray that you stay and you continue, right? Do not let anyone take this away from you, because there will be a time when we won't have access to it, and we need to feed ourselves so that we can feed others and strengthen others. God bless y'all. Commercial breaks with Miss Education. Until next time. Bye.